Mass psychogenic illness, also known as a disorder, is the manifestation of another person's symptoms which end up infecting the other person, or also known as hysteria. And it's no wonder that there were moments marked by hysteria and panic. So, welcome to the Panic and Hysteria Iceberg. I'm Sir Chris, I explore the internet and I make videos about it. Welcome viewer. Before starting, I want to say that this iceberg will work the same way as the most recent one. We start from known to unknown. War of the Worlds. A well-known radio broadcast played during Halloween. The episode was from a science fiction book, in which the radio operator of this radio series ends up becoming famous due to his realistic performance, which caused panic to those who joined halfway through in the United States. The broadcast started as if it were just another night broadcast, which in the middle stops the music and talks about breaking news, about gas explosions seen on Mars. And then the music returns, until they end up seeing a monster that ended up arriving on the planet Earth. Police and curious people surround the creature, and they get melted. And for last, another radio operator can be heard saying that the city is being evacuated, while the other cities in the United States are being surrounded, until the radio operator dies. Toilet paper. 2020 is, and will be remembered due to the pandemic, but during the first wave of when the virus was still unknown, there were several people who, upon knowing that they were going to be quarantined, quickly went to supermarkets to buy largest quantities of toilet paper. And from here, the rest of the story is predictable. Charlie Charlie. Charlie Charlie is a challenge that consisted of talking to a spirit, and this was done with a piece of paper, written yes, no, and with two crossed pencils. And supposedly the pencils would move, but in reality it was just the wind. When it went viral, several religious people considered the game to be demonic, and even the country Libya banned this game for allegedly causing 6 suicides. Backmasking. Backmasking is a technique used in music to hide a message that can only be heard if the music is reversed. And that can be done unintentionally. So much so that there was a band that unintentionally made this popular, the Beatles, where at the time there was a rumor that Paul had died, and one of their songs, I'm So Tired, confirmed this rumor through an inverted message, which said, Paul is a dead man, miss him. Even Led Zeppelin, in Stairway to Heaven, supposedly had satanic messages. To the point where in California, there is a law that prevents subliminal messages from appearing in a song without the viewer knowing. 21st of December 2012, or best known as 2012 phenomenon, was a date that had been placed on a Greek calendar. As this date stood, the interpretation had two visions: a new beginning for humanity, or their end. It's funny that I remember this when I was a kid, and the first thing I said was, I won't be able to open the gifts. Momo and Challenge. The Momo Challenge is a urban legend about videos that have their image in the middle, which include dangerous challenges. Allegedly, these videos appeared on YouTube Kids, and with that, several parents panicked with a good reason. Columbine Effect. The Columbine Massacre was a and a attempt. This shooting caused 12 deaths and 21 injured, which in the end, both shooters end up taking their life inside the library. And that unfortunately changed the world. The panic of this tragedy caused several states to reinforce the defense tactics and school security. And the strangest part is, someone made a video game about this event. Worse, there are those who think of them as heroes. Miracle of the Sun. Miracle of the Sun was an event that brought together 30,000 people from Portugal. It started with 3 children who had said that the Virgin Mary had promised them a miracle on that day. And several people saw different things that day. Some saw the sun rotating in the sky, the sun moving in a zigzag, and others saw a disc the size of the sun that shone different colors. But it also had inexplicable miracles, cure for blindness and paralysis, which ended up being proven by doctors' testimonies. Pokemon seizures. A Pokemon episode, more specifically, the 38th of the first season, which was released for just one day. In this episode, there's a specific part that allegedly made several Japanese viewers to have seizures, which in the end, several were diagnosed with only mild symptoms. The news spread quickly, and the next day, TV Tokyo apologized. Obviously, the episode ended up being banned worldwide, and Pokemon stopped for 4 months. Pepsi Number Fever. The Pepsi Number Fever, or known as Incident 349, was a promotion where in 1992, Pepsi placed specific numbers on the caps, which a specific number had a chance of winning 100 to 1 million pesos. At that time, there was only 2 Pepsi bottles with the number 349. Everything was perfect, until a computer error caused 800,000 caps to be made with that number, but without a security code. When they announced the number, thousands of Filipinos went to collect their prize, but left empty-handed, because they did not have security codes. After an emergency meeting, people who had the caps without the security codes received $20, and this offer was accepted by 400,000 people. Unfortunately, those who refused formed an alliance to destroy Pepsi products, which allegedly that alliance caused the deaths of 5 people. Mount Pleasant Incident. At a school in Mount Pleasant, Mississippi, in 1976, 15 students fell and began to twitch. School officials suspected that it might be a use, but it was impossible as they found nothing. Until it reached a point where a third of the students stayed at home, afraid that they would be the next victim, in which school officials came to a conclusion that it was just a mass hysteria, as it wasn't the only school to suffer from this. Banned commercial from Hong Kong. The ad begins with some children in a line with their hands on each other's shoulders, which then cuts to the back view and the following message appears. Trains. You were small, they were wonderful. We're working hard to keep it that way for you. But it all starts from the moment that the director reviews the ad. There were 6 children in the line, but in the video, 7 ended up appearing. Several rumors begin. One of them was that the last child in the line ended up dying 1 year later, or that the group of children completely disappeared. It came to a point where this ad was talked a lot in Hong Kong, and this ad had to be removed due to the effects it had on the viewers. Scare Theater has a video that goes more in depth into the case. I suggest you to watch it after this one. Emiratis Flight 203. On a 14-hour flight from Dubai to New York, 106 passengers out of 521 begin to feel sick with the following symptoms: coughing, sneezing, fever, and vomiting. It reached an alarming point where upon arriving in New York, the plane was quarantined, in which 11 were taken to the hospital, others only had common colds and flus, and the rest of the passengers believed that they were also sick by watching the others. Brunei Incident. In April 2014, a school ended up being affected by a wave of mass hysteria, which caused panic among parents, teachers, and members of the community. Several students who were affected say that they were possessed by jinn spirit and began to scream, shake, and cry, in which religious teachers managed to calm the students with Quran verses. Jinns were as important as angels, that when humanity was created by God, they refused to bow before the new creature, and thus they got expelled from the paradise. Clowns. In 2016, people dressed as clowns began to appear in the United States, near forests and schools, in which some used the disguise to rob people, to threaten, and there were even reports of unarmored clowns chasing people. As the number of clowns grew, the pressure on the police also grew, because there were those who took advantage of this trend to record several videos for YouTube. 2018 Hawaii missile. Okay, imagine this. You're having your breakfast, about to start your chalky milk, until... On January 13th of 2018, all phones, televisions, and radios received an alert of a ballistic missile coming to Hawaii. In panic, several people began to prepare for the worst, until 38 minutes later, a second message is received, saying that the previous one was a false alarm. And that happened due to a communication error. For some, it was probably the most stressful 30 minutes of their lives. Strawberries with Sugar virus. Yes, another one in Portugal. Strawberries with Sugar was a popular series in Portugal, but there was a specific episode where a virus begins to affect the school, including the protagonists. Days after this episode, the symptoms of the disease from that episode affected 300 students in 14 different schools here in Portugal, which forced some of the schools to temporarily close. But allegedly, INEM came to the conclusion that it was just another case of mass hysteria. Meowing nuns. It all started in France, where a nun, out of nowhere, started meowing like a cat, after which other nuns joined the old one, to the point where it ended up being a daily habit. But eventually it all ended when the police threatened to whip the nuns if they didn't stop. The reason why they started is still a mystery. Bomb Oaks. On 31st of 2007, several placards were seen on the streets, in an attempt to promote the cartoon Aqua Teen Hunger Force. When the Boston police saw them, they identified them as improvised bombs, which then caused panic in Boston. The police were mistaken in identifying them because allegedly they were similar parts, like a circuit board, exposed wires, and electrical tape. But eventually, it was just an harmless campaign. Irish Fright. The Irish Fright happened in 1685. On December 13th, Gilbert said that Irish troops were about to invade London, which caused a huge panic, and in just 30 minutes, 100,000 men reinforced their homes. A day later, this rumor had already reached Norfolk, Kent, and Surrey, after the rumor that Kingston had been burned and that the residents had cut down trees to make it difficult for the Irish to enter. And it spread to Somerset in just a few days. Eventually passed after a few days, as it was all a lie. Night of the Broken Glass. The Night of Broken Glass was an event that took place in Germany on 19th of November of 1938, after the death of a German noble by a Jew. As a result, the German military and civilians destroyed around 7,000 Jewish stores, and 267 synagogues were burned. The streets were full of glass after what happened, and thus receiving the name Night of Broken Glass. Trembling disease. This disease affected some schools in Germany. In 1905, 200 students at Mason were affected by this disease, which caused them to shake and twitch. But this happened especially when students were given writing tasks. It is believed that the pressure and stress of having to achieve a good grade may have contributed to this hysteria, and the students ended up being treated with electric shocks. Halifax Slasher. It all started in 1920s, with a report from two victims, Mary and Gertrude, who had been attacked by a mysterious man who had a mallet. 5 days later, there was another report, but this time, the mysterious man had a sharp object. It got to the point where this got so serious that they needed reinforcements, in which they began to receive even more reports of attacks in the nearest cities. The panic was so big, to the point that people who looked similar to the man ended up being beaten. And everything calmed down when victims admitted that they had done the damage themselves, and it was all a hoax. Dancing Plague. In 1518, a woman started dancing in the streets of Strasbourg for weeks. 1 month later, 400 people would be dancing at that exact moment without stopping. There were even several musicians who played music thinking that it was just for fun, in which fatigue caused strokes and heart attacks. As no one knew the cause, no one knew how to treat this disease. Everything calmed down when the remaining people were taken to a sanctuary on a mountain. The Strasbourg Massacre. The Strasbourg Massacre took place on February 14th of 1349, in which the massacre consisted of several deaths of Jews. Officers took the Jews out of the city and took them to a wooden house, where they later were burned. They say that this massacre lasted 6 days. Salem Witch Trials. The Salem Witch Trials was a series of trials against people who were accused of practicing witchcraft, where 200 were accused, in which 15 of them were guilty and 20 were executed, in which most of the accusations were made by teenagers aged 17 or under. Damage. During the Soviet invasion in Germany, several officials, police, and civilians left the city of Demmin. When the Soviet army arrived in the city, when trying to negotiate, they got shot. When the other groups left the city, they exploded the bridges that led to the other cities around Demmin, and the remaining civilians in that city were trapped. Since they had nowhere to run, there were several collective family suicides, in which the methods varied greatly. Burari deaths. The Burari deaths were a collective suicide of 11 members of a family, Burari, in India, in which they were discovered after one of the family's neighbors noticed the absence of one of the deceased. And upon seeing that the door was open, he entered and noticed the bodies hanging. Everyone had their arms and feet tied, and it had been done as a form of ritual. But now, that's a story for another video.